Cerberus narrations. Because who needs sleep anyway?
This happened just last week. I collected my daughter from school as usual, and we stopped off at the shops to get some new school shoes, then headed home. I stopped at a traffic light queue and waited. Then, I spotted this man as he began to cross the street, in between my car and another. I wouldn't have thought anything of it, but his eyes were fixed on my car rather than the road. He walked around the front of my car, then came around to my driver's side door and lifted his hand toward the door handle like he was going to open it. He quickly looked around him, like he was checking if anyone would see what he was about to do. But my finger instantly hit the auto lock button that locks every door. The car in front of me then moved as the light changed. I took off without even looking back at the man. I don't know what he was planning to do, but the fact that he was staring at my car and reaching for the door handle tells me it couldn't have been anything good. This happened to my mum in the early 80s in my native country. My mum gave birth to my sister, and she was completely alone. Single mother, with no one by her side, not even a friend or a co-worker. Her family lived in a different state, and she had kept quiet about her pregnancy. My mum gave birth to a healthy baby girl in a public hospital. Almost immediately, a nun started shadowing my mum, and eventually told my mum a couple was interested in raising my sister, if she was willing to give her up. My mum, of course, declined, and told the nun to go away. That was in the morning. That same night, at around 1 AM, my mum's nurse, an older lady, wakes her up in a hurry, and has my mum and my sister's bags packed. She told her, "Sweetheart, they're going to take your baby. If you want to keep her, then you have to leave now. I'll bring her to you, but you have to go now. If you stay, she'll be gone by tomorrow morning." My mum got her shit and left with my sister in the middle of the night, still in pain. Nurse Amelia was sweet enough to give my mum money for a cab that she herself called for. My mum named my sister after Nurse Amelia. Sadly, these stories are not unheard of from that time. The country was still in a dictatorship, or getting out of one, so people in the government did whatever they wanted. Children from poor, unwed mothers were usually taken away and gave up for adoption to rich couples who'd paid the doctors and the hospital money for healthy babies. It's fucked up, and my mum got very, very lucky. Thank God for Nurse Amelia. It happened when I was 13, and it's something I've never forgotten. We had just moved into a brand new house, in a brand new housing development. A lot of the houses around us were either unfinished or had families that had just moved in. Behind our house was a lot of field, mostly for more future houses. We lived in a fairly safe small city, and the housing development was very quiet, so for the first few years we lived there, we never bothered to lock the doors, even at night most of the time. It just wasn't something we thought about. My parents had just put in hardwood floor, so the house was a pretty echoey single story. One night, as I was laying in bed trying to fall asleep, I thought I heard the backsliding glass door open. I was up late on the internet, but everyone else was asleep, so the house was quiet. I had my door slightly open, so my cat could come and go, and so I knew that I was definitely hearing something. I froze, hoping it wasn't the door, but a moment later, I heard it slide shut. Then I began to hear what sounded like heavy shoes walking across the hardwood floor. It was a very specific sound, and suddenly, I couldn't breathe. The footsteps were slow and quiet, like they were trying to make as little noise as possible. But because the floor was wood, and our house had high ceilings, the steps echoed down the hallway to my room. Then, I heard them stop, the sound of the hallway closet being opened, and then the door quietly clicking shut, like they turned the knob, pulled the door closed, and then released the knob once it was in place. It was silent after that. My heart was beating so fast, and I began crying. The only way to my parents' room was up the hallway. Their door was only about 20 feet away from where that hallway closet was. I was frozen, and I honestly thought I would pee my pants. I was so scared. However, it was silent for long enough that I knew I had to get my dad. So I stood up and walked sock-footed to my door. I stood there for a long time breathing. Then, I ran. It's not a long hallway, but I went as fast as I could. I got inside their room and tried to wake my dad up. "Dad! Dad!" I was frantically whispering. "Huh?" He was half asleep. "Dad!" What?" "Dad, I think there's someone inside the house." "What?" "Get up. I think there's someone inside the house." "There's no one in here. Go back to sleep." "Yes, there is." I start crying. That gets him up. My mum also wakes up at this point as well, so they both get out of bed. My dad, sure that there's no one in the house, doesn't even grab anything as a weapon, but I follow behind him as he leaves the room. He goes into the living room, passes the closet, and turns on all the lights in the house. I remember standing in the living room, knowing exactly where the person was and not being able to say anything. He tells me, "Look, there's no one." He doesn't check the closet though, and I don't tell him to. I'm so afraid that whoever is in there will jump out with a knife and kill my dad in front of me. And 13-year-old me keeps thinking, I can't be the one responsible for my dad's death. So I say nothing, and I don't tell him to check the closet. I don't know why he didn't. If I were a dad, I would have. He locks the front door and tells me to go back to bed. They wait until I'm back in my room before they close their own bedroom door and go back to sleep. Again, the house is silent, and I'm laying there afraid because that person is still in here, in the one place he didn't look. Suddenly, I hear the closet door open, just as slowly and as quietly as before. Then, the footsteps again. I could hear them so clearly walking towards the kitchen, where the back door is, and they stop. That's followed by the sound of the back door being slid open, and then quietly being pushed closed again. I hear the back door click into place, and then the house is silent. I'm laying there, crying and breathing, but hearing them leave the house, I felt instant relief, though I was still shaking with fear. I give it a few minutes, hoping they wouldn't come back, and they don't. So after a bit, I sneak out there, My one and only thought is to lock the back door, which I managed to do. But the scariest part was that when I looked at the hall closet, the door wasn't closed anymore. It was cracked, because they hadn't bothered to close it after they left, though I know it was definitely closed when my dad was out there with me. I tried bringing it up to them years later, and they still didn't believe me, but that's not something you just hear.